I started attending different entrepreneur events, joining different entrepreneur communities, got a lot of value from them. But what I felt going to all these different events was that there was a missed opportunity. The value that I got from them was the connections that I made, because I could maintain those connections and we could continue to support each other. So I decided I wanted to create an event that was focused, that started with a focus on connection first. How do I get a group of entrepreneurs together and help them create really deep connection? Take a group of people and you take them outside and you mountain bike up a steep hill together, and you're sweating together and you're cursing together and grunting, and then you have a ton of fun together. That group tends to bond really quickly. I wanted to create something where there was a big dose of adventure to bring people together, a big dose of challenge, because shared challenge brings people together, and an opportunity for openness and vulnerability and not pretending or posturing, just being human.
Welcome back to the Take a Chance on You podcast, hosted by me, Alexandra Forsyth, passing the mic to Mike Lersick, who is the founder of Wayfinders. This is a community bringing founders and entrepreneurs together. Mike, how are you doing?
Actually doing quite well today. Yeah, and I'm excited for our chat.
Good. I am. And Mike, you're joining us from Toronto, right?
Toronto, where spring has finally sprung after a long winter.
It's the same here in London. It's feeling warm. It's feeling optimistic, I think. Do you want to give the listeners a little bit of an introduction to who you are and what you do?
So many ways I could meet that question. I'll give you the professional version. I am the founder, and the title I give myself is Chief Explorer at Wayfinders, and that's both exploring the world and exploring kind of more inner domains, both my own and the people that I serve. And really what I do is I take high functioning, high achieving entrepreneurs and I try and help move them from high achievement to high alignment. People that have spent most of their lives just really chasing and grinding and hustling and scaling, and help them, and often getting misaligned along the way, either through their work, their relationships, their health, whatever that may be, and help them reconnect to who they are at their core, what's valuable to them. And I take people to some of the wildest places on the planet to do that. Really, remote parts of Mongolia or the jungles of Papua New Guinea or the deserts of Saudi Arabia. And I find that
Wow.
Yeah. And I find that the farther away I take people from their familiar context, the deeper the work goes.
Walk the listeners through, what do these experiences and retreats look like?
Typically anywhere from 6 to 9 days. The ones that are a little farther away, like Mongolia or Papua New Guinea, they tend to be longer, because if I'm going to, make people schlep halfway around the world to attend, we're going to go deep and we're going to make it worth their while. As I mentioned, we go to some pretty wild, remote places. Sometimes we're staying in beautiful lodges and, resorts, whatever. I have an event that I've run in Uganda, for instance, where we stay at this beautiful 4-star lodge on the edge of windy impenetrable forest, which is where half of the world's mountain gorillas live. And it's beautiful lodge, incredible service, amazing location, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes when we're in Western Mongolia, we are staying in tents and we're in the middle of nowhere, and there's nobody around except for us and a few nomads. And that particular event, we are migrating with a local nomad family when they're doing their fall migration to their winter grounds. So it varies, but there's three main elements are adventure, community, and clarity. So the adventure part of it is we're going to these places and we're, embarking on a really cool adventure. We do really cool activities, whether it's migrating with the nomads or in Mongolia, or whether it's fishing with tribes people in Papua New Guinea, or maybe the connection part, really deep connection among the participants. I create an environment where people can really dig deep into these big themes of life and where they can be open and honest and vulnerable. And that tends to connect people really deeply. So people come away from this with really close relationships. And then the clarity part is just creating a context for them to be honest with themselves and to do the work, to really understand where they're out of alignment and what needs to change, and have the support of other people on that same journey. So it's a mix. It's a mix of all sorts of different things. Instead of, our group facilitation, I might send people off into the wilderness for 3 hours on their own and just say, go sit and be by yourself and just listen, and don't leave your phones and everything behind. Leave your journal, just sit and see what comes up. So it really changes from day to day. And I try to let the place that we're visiting inform the journey that we're going through.
So when am I joining?
Question. I think the question is when you're ready.
I think so. I'm very intrigued. One of my questions Do you tend to do a lot of the facilitation in terms of the activities and the workshops, or do you bring in external moderators? And I'm thinking about well-being, breath work, Pilates, yoga, that type of environment.
It varies. Sometimes I have a co-facilitator. Sometimes it's just me. I use all sorts of different modalities, whether it's reflection, journaling, small group dialogues. I'm a trained breathwork facilitator. I also use guided meditation and visualization. Sometimes sometimes the most powerful thing I do, I don't really do anything. I just say, go sit in the wilderness for 3 hours. Sometimes we do it for 24 hours. We send people off with a tent and go sit and see what comes up. But sometimes I also bring a co-facilitator along. So I'm running an event in Iceland at the end of May with my good friend Philip McKernan from Ireland, who's world-renowned coach, facilitator. He's bringing his unique kind of spin on this, and I love, the possibilities for our collaboration are so beautiful because we each have these different skill sets and we each have different sort of opportunities or weaknesses or whatever you call it. We can fill each other in. It doesn't really make sense to bring in somebody just to teach a few yoga classes. I'm not going to fly them all the way to Mongolia just to teach a few yoga classes. Yeah. So I've done a lot of training myself. Like I'm a trained yoga teacher. I'm a trained breathwork facilitator. So rather than hiring people, I try to just up level my own skills and also take advantage of the people who are there bring their own skills, right? So there's a lot of crowdsourced stuff as well from what does that, one of the questions. Yeah. And one of the questions I ask in the intake form is what is a gift you'd like to offer to the group, that comes from your heart, your zone of genius, whatever that may be.
Zone of genius. I haven't had that before, but I am really into Kundalini yoga. So the
As well.
and it's hard. And when people do say, "What do you recommend?" I do say it's not for the faint-hearted. It obviously opens up the chakras. You can decide. I do the heart chakra a lot and the root chakra as well. Kundalini is a really good way of kind of opening yourself up, but it's really challenging. And I've been doing it for 4 months now, so I do still feel like a beginner in some ways. I'm getting better at the breath of fire, but it's such a release in terms of energy.
When I did my training, they used to make us do that for an hour straight. And, as you know, it involves holding your arms up at a 45-degree angle and breathing really intensely and trying to hold your arms
Really
up that long. But you get into these flow states, and the pain of holding your arms, it's not like it disappears, but it's sort of at moments it can disappear. And then your capability becomes so much greater. When we started out, it's like, oh, I can barely hold my arms up for 3 minutes. And then when you get into the right state and flow state, whatever, you're capable of these incredible things, like holding your arms above your head for an hour straight.
I get into flow state number one, but also I think to myself, I can't stop because I think breath of fire for me any longer than 3 or 4 minutes at a time. But I wouldn't want to stop halfway through. I almost tell myself I've got to get to the end. So it's almost me versus me. I'm shocked that I've only been doing it for 4 months. I wish somebody had told me about it sooner because I changed my life in so many ways. And I do a lot of somatic meditation. So that's really getting in touch with on the emotional side, asking yourself questions.
People use different modalities to arrive at the same thing, which is like a deeper relationship with oneself and more honesty and more clarity. And journaling for me, it's to me, it's just a dialogue with the soul or a dialogue with the subconscious. And if I do it the right way, where I'm not overthinking it, because it's easy to start journaling and then you're like, oh, that sounds stupid. And, you have to set the container for yourself. Like nobody's ever going to read this but me. You can get yourself a journal with a lock on it or whatever if you're worried about that, but just like a safe space where you can just get all of that out, right? And I find if it's done the right way, it's incredible what can come out. And it's like all this stuff that's constantly bubbling up below the surface. It's actually running the operating system of our life, all these unconscious beliefs and values and stuff like that. Once you engage in that dialogue, a lot of this stuff comes out. It allows you to work with it.
Talk to me about Wayfinders and how it came to be.
I've been an entrepreneur my whole adult life. My previous company, I started it right out of university and basically created this company operating high-end mountain bike trips all over the world. And I, leading up to when I started Wayfinders, I had my foot on the gas for many years and I brought on investors, took on debt, grew the team, expanded all over the world. And what I found was that as I was growing the company rapidly, I was encountering all sorts of problems for which I wasn't really equipped. And that, as a company grows, you generate and encounter new problems all the time. So the problems of a 2-person company are very different from the problems of a 10-person and a 100-person and 1,000, whatever. And so I decided, once I got slapped around enough by the universe, the business world, whatever, I decided to get over my own hubris and my own belief that I was God's gift to entrepreneurship. I developed a little bit of humility to try and learn from others. And so I started attending different entrepreneur events, joining different entrepreneur communities, got a lot of value from them. But what I felt going to all these different events was that there was a missed opportunity. The value that I got from them wasn't so much the information that was getting fire hosed at me. Here's a speaker and here's another workshop and there's another speaker and another workshop and 15-minute networking break in the hallway. It's like the value I got was the connections that I made, because I could maintain those connections and we could continue to support each other rather than somebody just like spewing out the very same talk I could watch on YouTube. And so I decided I wanted to create an event that was focused, that started with a focus on connection first. How do I get a group of entrepreneurs together and help them create really deep connection? And still, plenty of learning, whatever. And so with my other company, I was still running it at the time. I knew that you take a group of people and you take them outside and you mountain bike up a steep hill together and you're sweating together and you're cursing together and grunting, and then you have a ton of fun together. You tend to bond. That group tends to bond really quickly. And so I wanted to create something where there was a big dose of adventure to bring people together, a big dose of challenge, because shared challenge brings people together, and an opportunity for openness and vulnerability and not pretending or posturing, just being human. And so the first event went off really well. People loved it. They asked me to do more. I did a few more, and then I decided I really loved this way more than the other company. And I started the process to sell that company so that I could focus on this full time.
It's so interesting. And I really love what you mentioned at the end about being human. I think in the business world, it can feel quite transactional. We know that. And that's the nature of the game, KPIs, ROI. But we forget about our own ROI as human beings. Being an entrepreneur, you're always switched on. You're wearing multiple hats, running a business. So being able to get a group like that together and form connection and conversations, quite rare, actually.
Yeah. And, for a lot of entrepreneurs, they often have nowhere to go to have those conversations, because it's a lot of pressure. I'm sure, like the roller coaster of entrepreneurship. So one day it's like, oh my God, this is going so amazing. And then the next day, like, oh my God, this is the hardest thing in the world. I want to quit.
What have I done? Why have I done this? I had a great life and I took the leap because I feel like I'm different. I can't fit inside one box. It's just not the way my brain functions. But actually, that box is looking quite enticing right now.
And so that's the journey of entrepreneurship.
It's one of the most rewarding, is the only thing I'll add to that. When you may not be able to see the end, but you can see steps that will get you there. You'll have a conversation that will spark something you hadn't thought about. And I'm sure that's the same for you and your community with the entrepreneurs.
Well, yeah. And, if you're a busy, successful entrepreneur, you may not have anywhere where you can talk about all these struggles and everything you're going through. Most founders, owners, whatever, don't feel like they can be open and vulnerable with their staff because they'll be seen as weak in the process. If they have shareholders, they certainly can't talk to them about it because the shareholders will get all worried, like, oh, what's going on? He's struggling, or what's happening with my money? And then in a lot of these peer groups I joined, it was kind of like this posturing contest. Everybody's talking about how amazing they are and all their achievements and how much revenue, how many zeros they have on their balance sheet. Very few contexts to just show up like, oh my God, like last month was brutal. I barely made payroll. My marriage is falling apart, whatever. All these things that are so common, yet nobody talks about. And that was, I wanted to create a place where, and that's obviously not limited to entrepreneurship. Everybody struggles. But what I found was that, creating that environment, it just felt like such a breath of fresh air for people to be able to just show up and be real and not have to pretend they have all this together. And one thing I wanted to say, when you're talking about entrepreneurship being rewarding, one of my favorite definitions of entrepreneurship is someone who'll work 80 hours a week so they don't have to work 40 hours a week.
I saw something yesterday. Somebody said exactly the same thing. You work 100 hours, so you don't have to work 50. And it's bizarre the way we've trained our minds to think that our reality is obviously better than working those 40 hours, but flip it around. You're working for yourself. You're making your own decisions. You get to build either a product or a solution that begins with you and then onto the customer. So I wouldn't change things ever, but there are those days, as you say, where it would be nice to have a circle of people who just get it. And I think it's just get it, no questions asked, non-judgmental. And there are a few of those groups around. I think about London, it's quite entrepreneurial here. And there are different networking events you can go to, but can feel quite lonely at times. And we don't talk about that enough.
Okay, there's so many studies about the confluence of entrepreneurship with anxiety, depression, conditions like ADHD. I don't know if we've solved correlation or causation. Does entrepreneurship cause these things? Do these things lead people to, to people with these conditions? Are they drawn to entrepreneurship, whatever? But there's, people in the entrepreneurial world tend to struggle more. And I think, if I look back in my own journey, I think part of what drew me to entrepreneurship is I didn't feel like I could fit in, like as you talked about the box. I didn't feel like I graduated with an economics and history degree. The morning after my last exam, I put everything in my Volvo station wagon and I drove out west to the mountains. And I thought, I don't know what to do with this degree. I'm going to go be a ski bum and I'll figure it out later. And then that turned into, 10 years living in the Rockies and starting my company. I just didn't know how to fit what, my internal view with the world I saw around me. And I knew I didn't want to sit in a cubicle. I didn't want to push numbers around, economics policy analyst or something like that. That didn't feel right to me. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs describe that. They know they're different and they need a different context for that.
I mean, it came to me quite late because I spent 5 years in corporate and I worked in threat intelligence, cybersecurity, and I loved my career because I got to speak to clients all the time. But I was slowly learning more about myself and how I like talking to people, but all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds. And that's what developed into the podcast a bit later on. I just thought to myself, I'm just not the same. I don't think the way other people do. I have these grand plans and I think global and I think about everyone. So how that fits into your standard day to day, it doesn't. And I'm okay with that. I think I'm okay with that in my head because, yeah, I'll be fine.
Yeah, good for you.
Going back to kind of the struggles and anxiety and thinking more vulnerably, guests tend to open up on the podcast. Is there any stories you'd like to share for the listeners? I've shared my own sense of I have anxiety. I'm very open about that. And being a public speaker and having anxiety is a catch-22 because you're on stage in front of hundreds of people at a time. But I've gotten to the point where I embrace it a lot more now. And I think to myself, I'm excited and I'm ready to speak to people. But it's been a journey.
Well, certainly, I'm on the same journey of exploring all these things that are going on inside me and how they relate to the world around me. And, I can say that the most transformative period of my life, I was 10 years into running my previous business in my early 30s. And Christmas Eve 2004, the woman that I was dating broke up with me. And that sent me into a 2.5 year journey of darkness and depression and, the long dark night of the soul, as I call it. And it was a deeply difficult time. I really struggled. There really did not seem to be any point to life at that point in my life. And as difficult as it was, I look back at that period with really deep gratitude because the person that went into that experience and the person that came out the other end were two very different people. And I'm grateful and proud of the person that I've become in large part due to that experience and due to the support of some amazing people, including a very gifted therapist who both saved and transformed my life. And it sort of felt like I was painting life or coloring life with this very limited palette of colors. And that palette of colors up until that point was really just how can I extract maximum pleasure from life for myself? And I was living an extremely hedonistic life. I was living in the Rockies. I was skiing and mountain biking all the time. I was in a band and I was having fun playing. And it was just a lot of hedonism, right? And it was really just all about me. And I barely paid attention to other people, didn't have a lot of empathy, and I didn't really understand suffering. I wasn't, even despite all of that, I wasn't particularly happy, but I didn't really understand human suffering. And then as I went through that experience, descending into this darkness, my first reaction to that was like, oh my God, what is happening? This is so confusing. What is all this pain and then all this shame that came with it, and thinking, oh my God, I'm the only person because I didn't really understand other people's experience. I thought I was the only one in the world going through this. And I felt like, but the internal voice was like, oh my God, you're such a loser. What is going on with you? And then as I started doing the work and coming out of that, I started feeling better, but also much more open and empathetic to the people around me, because I understood what human suffering was. And I could see it in other people's eyes. I could empathize with it, and allowed me to connect with people on a much deeper level than I'd known before. So all of that, I'm deeply grateful for waking me up, basically.
But in such a raw and honest way. And as you say, the person that went through that journey isn't the same one that started. You've learned from your life experiences. I always say grief is a really interesting word, and how we don't tend to grieve ourselves enough when we go through different seasons and different cycles of life, because we don't take that time to really appreciate where we are and where we're going. But for you as well, having empathy, emotional intelligence is such a strong trait to have, and you've managed to turn it around in a way that now you listen to people and you see them for who they are. It's really powerful to be able to do that now with the experiences that you offer to entrepreneurs. Again, it's all about giving back, acts of service and impact.
Yeah, it's funny how life gives you what you need in order to prepare for your next phase. So I discussed this a lot on my podcast, and I released. There was just some stuff that needed to come out of me, and I didn't really have a podcast on my bingo card, but there it showed up one day, and it's like, this stuff needs to come out of me. Am I going to write a book about it or whatever? I really love the spoken word. I love music. I have a background as a musician, and so I decided to create this podcast and using my music production skills to really create a beautiful sonic journey. The structure I decided on for the podcast was looking at midlife through the lens of the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell described. There's as he described it, there's 12 stages. I simplified it into 10, but there's the ordinary world. We're just kind of going about our life, just plodding along, just doing our life. And then there's the call. Something happens to call us out of that life. And so if you look at this structure, like it's present in almost every movie, book, or whatever, you can't unsee it when you see it. But the most obvious example is Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, and he's just plodding along on Tatooine, doing his farming thing with his aunt and uncle, whatever. And then Obi-Wan, and pick any hero movie or any action, it's all there, and he's just plodding along, and then Obi-Wan shows up, and then the next stage is the resistance. We resist the call. We want to stay stuck in our ordinary world, and we want to stay in our comfortable, familiar world. So he whines and says, I don't want to go. I don't want to be a Jedi, all this kind of stuff. And eventually accepts the journey, and he has to go through all these trials, and it's very difficult. But then he comes out of it as a Jedi. He comes back with all these gifts for others, and how that relates to, a regular human life. And it often happens in midlife because, in our 20s and 30s, we're so consumed with climbing the corporate ladder, succeeding, achieving, building a family, all these kind of things. And then it's only after, maybe 15, 20 years of that suddenly the call starts showing up. And it sounds like that's maybe what happened for you, is like you realized that life that you were living was not right for you. And I'm guessing that you maybe heard some whispers of that, and then you just sort of like pushed them away and said, no, this is, that's crazy. I'll stick with this. And
I'll give it another go. I'll give this time of my life another go, whether it's a job, a friendship, a relationship, whatever dynamic I was in. I thought it'll be okay next week, next month, next year. I'll reevaluate later on. And yeah, I definitely kept pushing things off. When you mentioned kind of feeling like a loser, as much as I hated you saying that, I've also felt the same. And that's actually the first time I've heard somebody use those words so matter of factly, but I definitely have had moments where I think, oh my God, everybody else is so much further ahead than I am. I feel like a bit of a loser, really. I'm not sure if this is the right pathway for me. So I really appreciate you saying that, because I think for any listeners out there, it's really important to understand we are just human beings. We pretty much do all feel the same way as each other at some stage, feeling like you're not where you're meant to be. So just want people to know that, because I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I know a lot of really successful people, and some of the most successful people I know still have that voice. And for some of them, it's quite strong. And one of the reasons they're successful is because they're trying to prove themselves to that voice. And that voice, might be their mom or their dad or school teacher or whatever. And it still echoes many years or decades later. And so they spend their whole life just really trying to prove themselves. But, coming back to the hero's journey, there's that resistance phase. We want to stay, we want to stay in our familiar world. And then the call just gets louder and louder. And that usually manifests as we become more and more uncomfortable with the life we're living. Often we can't put our finger on it. It's like, my life's kind of okay from the outside. Like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why I feel so crappy. Like, what's going on? Sometimes that call arrives as like a big shock. You get fired. You get dumped by your girlfriend on Christmas Eve, as I said, whatever. And that just sends you into a tailspin. And that's just because you've been ignoring that call for so long. And then all of a sudden it's a big shock. And it's like, oh my God. Often it occurs when we lose an identity, whether it's an identity as, our career or our company, or identity as partner of this, person or whatever. And then we're faced with that journey of answering, embarking on the next phase, which is, who the hell am I? Who am I at my core beneath all these messages that people have told me about who I am and what I am? And so now at this point in my life, right now, the last couple of months, I've been going through something pretty difficult, and it's been a little bit puzzling, but I've also been through this cycle enough times to know that every time that this has happened, that it's led me to somewhere better, a better version of myself, more growth, more understanding. And so I'm able to, instead of just resisting and, this is so terrible, why is this happening? I'm able to slow down and recognize, hey, it's happening again. Life, my soul is calling me to something else. And the job right now is to just slow down and pay attention and listen to that voice and pay attention to some clues along the way about where it might be leading. The more you can just slow down and pay attention, the quicker that process can be.
I feel like with the podcast, not that I kept putting it off, but I always kept saying it's a passion project. I love doing it, but I'm not sure what the future holds. And then really taking it seriously in the last few months, things have just snowballed a lot faster than I thought they ever would. And I've already made kind of a little announcement that I'm doing live events, which I'm so excited about. But people have just come out of nowhere, helping, loving the idea, gravitating towards me.
Have fun.
Yeah. And yeah. But it's as you say, you resist because you think, well, I don't know if this is going to work out. I have no idea. But then as soon as you make that decision, things just start to happen, which is really magical, but also at the same time, really scary.
I think you touched on an important thing, is this element of magic. I think there is an element of magic to it. And when you actually finally make that decision, and it doesn't have to be huge, it doesn't have to be, I'm going to sell my house, quit my job, and then go do this. It's just like, I'm going to take a few steps down this path, and I'm going to see where it takes me. And that's what I'm committing to right now. When I'm working with people and they're feeling the pull towards something or whatever, but then they've got the resistance pulling them back, and they feel like, I need to figure it all out first. I need a business plan. I need to sort this out, and I just say, screw all that. What are some experiments you can run? Just some tiny experiments. They're going to, give you some clues, but also signal to the universe, hey, I'm willing to explore this. I'm committed to seeing where this takes me. And then it's amazing, this magic that occurs. Like, all of a sudden, all these people and resources start coming into our life to support us on this path. Then it feels at some point like you've got a flashlight and you can see the next few steps instead of just stumbling around in the dark. And then the light gets a little bit bigger and like, oh, that's where I need to go. And look at all these people walking with me along that path. Say yes, and then the magic shows up.
Definitely, you have to say yes. Then the vision gets bigger and more people put ideas in your head, and it's inspiration and it's knowledge, which is great. Because I always think as an entrepreneur, you're learning at light speed. I almost ask myself, what was I doing before this life? Because you are just learning so much information every single day. And I think in the last 12 months, I'm definitely not the same Alex as I was when I started. I mean, the evolution is mind bending. And I know that that's the same for a lot of entrepreneurs, and to yourself as well, your reinvention in the best way.
I think, the key ingredient in that is curiosity. It's just like maintaining that sense of curiosity. So I have this band on my wrist that says endless curiosity, because I know when I maintain curiosity, it keeps me from being stagnant. It keeps me growing. Sometimes that curiosity process is really painful, forces me to confront things about myself. Right? But if I want to grow, I have to confront these things. I have to get curious about myself, not just about the world or other people or software or whatever. I have to get curious about myself. And sometimes that curiosity leads me to difficult places, difficult truths I have to confront, difficult patterns that I have to learn. All of that leads me towards a life that feels more aligned, feels more in flow. I'm living my life, not somebody else's version of it. And even if that life has challenges, they are my challenges. They're not somebody else's challenges.
Have you read Chicken Soup for the Soul?
I did many years ago.
Many years ago, the overarching theme that you have to take responsibility for your life. Ultimately, that is what the book is telling you in many different ways. If you haven't read it, I think it's true. I think the challenges that you're facing, they're yours, and they might not be created by you, but they're yours to be accountable for and to make the necessary changes. And there's something really inspiring and empowering about doing that because, like you say, you're not living a life that is controlled by anybody else or environment. It's yours to do with it what you want. That can bring certain feelings of possibly imposter syndrome and fear and anxiety. But once you get past that, it may never leave you. To be honest, I still wake up and feel, gosh, the pang sometimes. But again, it's my life to decide what I want to do with it.
Yeah. And I think this idea of responsibility can be, I don't know, confused sometimes, but taking responsibility is not the same thing as making it your fault. It's just understanding that, bad things happen to us, difficult things, suffering, pain, whatever, inflicted on us by others, where our agency lies and how we respond to how we respond to those things and how we choose to move forward with that. And so if my background, contains a lot of really difficult things, it's not a child's job to take agency and responsibility. They don't have the capacity for that. But as you become an adult, it's very easy to get mired in that and stuck in that and say, this happened to me. These awful people did this thing to me. None of it was my fault. And then you just anchor in that victim thing. But taking agency and responsibility means you take responsibility for what you choose to do with that going forward, how you choose to make meaning of those experiences, for instance, and how you choose to heal from it, whatever that may be. It doesn't mean you make it your fault in any sort of way. And to me, it's been such an important lesson to learn how to take responsibility, how to take agency. I'm going through this difficult situation right now where I have these people who are refusing to take agency for their own situations and trying to put that on me. And in the past, my training would have been like, oh, God, I'm so sorry this happened. But somewhere along the line, I learned to be a people pleaser because I felt that if I didn't do that, then it would compromise or sever the relationship. And now I'm able to stand firm in my truth and say, listen, this is what I take responsibility for. This is my agency, but you are not taking agency for your role. And this, I'm not willing to enter into that dynamic with you. And so I try to live in a world where everybody is trying to take agency and responsibility for their role in things and not deflect responsibility, not deflect it onto others, and including myself, so that I'm not doing that to others. So it's an important thing. And it's, life changes when you enter into that world and just say, hey, I have the agency and the power to create what I want out of this situation.
Absolutely. Agency, responsibility. Like you say, it doesn't mean that it's your fault. I always say that people react in certain situations with the resources that they have at the time, whether it's right or wrong. Unfortunately, that's the way the world works. As you grow older and learn more about yourself, then it's time to make a decision. Am I going to linger on those emotions and those feelings in that situation, or am I going to use it as fuel to get me to the next phase of my life? Also, for the listeners, it takes time and it's such a process. And as Mike said at the beginning about having a therapist, I have a therapist. I have for years. I find it so therapeutic to be able to sit in a chair and talk about how I feel. I've gone through CBT. I used to have panic attacks. It was quite an experience. And again, that's been a lot that I've gone through. But coming out the other side, I used to be a people pleaser as well. So I completely empathize with you do get to a point where that agency and responsibility, it's a necessity. People with our mindsets, we have to put boundaries in place, because if we don't, we seek to lose out, not the other person at all. It's very much, if we don't do that, we will lose some part of our autonomy and identity, perhaps, in a way. So it's a requirement, really. And I know that there will be a lot of listeners who relate to that.
Yeah. 100%. And this idea of boundaries is also another misunderstood notion, because a lot of people hear boundaries and it's like they think it's about the other person. But really, a boundary is just about you. It's about you. It's you taking on the role and process of self-care. And so boundary is basically saying to another person, if you do X, then I'm going to do Y. You're just making it very clear to them that your boundary specifies what you're going to do if they can't respect your need and your request. I was so terrible at this for so many years, and it's kind of amazing when you actually start to put these things in place, how things can shift and how the other person can shift in response to that. And they will test your boundary and they will test it, over and over. And then eventually, if you're consistent enough with it, they will change their behavior, and then it changes the dynamic of the relationship. It's quite amazing.
It's amazing because you do realize who will stay and who will go very quickly, because somebody who puts firm boundaries in place and knows who they are is less attractive than somebody who says yes to everything, agrees with everything that you have to say, and doesn't advocate for themselves. So the listeners, you don't have to resonate with everything that we're saying. I want people to have a voice and be successful in their own right and come to the table, have a seat at the table. So don't be afraid to put those boundaries in place, advocate for yourself, build your own identity and go out into the world and be proud of who you are. And I think, Mike, what we're building with the entrepreneur community, it's having space to explore, and it's having space to say, I'm not happy all the time, but I'm doing my best.
Yeah, it's a journey. There's no clear end point. It's a journey that goes on for our entire lives if we're committed to it. I don't think there's any
Yes.
mystical endpoint where it's like, okay, I've arrived. I know exactly who I am. My life mirrors exactly who I am. Challenge is done. I can just start coasting. It doesn't really work that way. There's always layers and layers to the onion, right? But if you stay committed, you just keep moving to a truer, better version of yourself. And if you stay committed, for me, it's just how can I get my exterior world to match my interior world? And so in my interior world, I know what makes me feel good. I know what resonates. I know the type of people that I feel good around, that my body feels safe around, that make me feel welcomed. I know the type of work that I want to do, all this kind of thing. And so it's getting that clarity, and then it's taking the steps to make sure that the exterior reality matches my inner world. And the more I do that, the more in flow everything feels. I don't wake up and like, oh my God, no challenges today. But I wake up and say, oh, I'm going to live my life today. And that feels really good. And I'm going to take some punches or whatever. There might be some difficulty, but they're my challenges. And there'll also be deep moments of flow and beauty and all that kind of stuff because I'm living my life.
The word trust immediately came up. Trusting yourself that you will get through any challenges that come your way. Trying your best might not always work out, but it's your life to live. And I think that's, again, really magical. But going right back to the beginning, I want to offer out any strategies for listeners from your side. Obviously, you work really heavily with the entrepreneurs. You've spoken about community and what it means to you.
Yeah, I think I just want to revisit one of them that I touched on, but it's this idea of experimentation and treating this process of experimentation as play. And so if there's something that you feel that you're feeling a calling to try and maybe, for me right now, I used to be a professional musician, then I had kids, and then I kind of left that world. I've got my guitars hanging up on the wall and I pull them down every now and then, but I haven't meaningfully played with other people in a long time. And so I'm really feeling this call right now. And I've got this musical project in my brain, and it's kind of large and involves a lot of people. And I've managed to, it's not like I'm perfect at this process because I can fall prey to the same traps, but I've managed to kind of build this thing up to the point where it's like, oh my God, that's such a huge project or whatever. Like, I can't do it right now. It's too big. Wait a minute. Slow things down here because this project probably will involve like a dozen or more people. It is kind of a big thing. But I'm asking myself, what does that look like as play, as experimentation? How can I take those first few steps down the path, make it really bite size? And that could be just like, hey, I'm going to, call up a friend and say, let's grab our guitars and let's sit on the porch and let's just jam together just so that I'm doing something to play music with other people. I have a very dear friend who's now my coach, and he was and continues to be a very successful entrepreneur. He runs this very large business with his brothers, and he's a gifted energy worker. He can sense into people's energy, their blockages, all that kind of stuff. And he had done a session with me once, and I thought it was wonderful. And he was telling me he wanted to start doing more of this. And he was in this mode where he was thinking about his business model and a business plan. He was sort of getting in his own head about it and staying stuck. I said, hey, what if you just treat this as play, experiments? What would that look like? And he said, well, I guess I could call up a few people and say, could I just do an energy session with you for free? There's no, obligation or anything like that. We met for coffee a couple weeks later. And it's like, oh my God, oh, it was so great. I had, 3 or 4 sessions. Like it just lit me up. It lit them up. It was really such a beautiful thing. And so he kept that process of play going. And then he started taking on some one-on-one clients, people actually paying him money. Then he started running some group sessions that were very well received. Okay, and I've created a monster because he's booked up far in advance, and it's hard for me to get on his calendar as well. And it's, he's super filled. He just loves this work, and he's so filled up with it. But he just treated those first few things as play, and like take away the pressure, take away all that. What's the first little step that feels like play to you? That feel the stakes are low, it doesn't matter if you fail or not. Just get out there and experiment and play. And maybe you have no idea what that is. And you don't know what your soul is. So then just treat that as a big experiment. Go take a jujitsu class, take a, salsa dancing class, whatever. Just follow some clues, see what lights you up, and then keep following those breadcrumbs and see where that takes you. But you have to get out there and you have to just start playing around with this.
Absolutely. I think for me with the podcast, I met somebody at a networking event and they said you should come and record here. Otherwise, I didn't have a studio yet. So networking, building up your brand as well online, your portfolio. I was the same. I'd already spoken to a handful of guests in person. They weren't guests yet. They were just people that I'd met. But I loved their story and I loved their challenges. And I thought combined, I've got a pretty good roster here of guests already. I don't need to do any external outreach. So I just contacted, I think it was 10, and they all said yes. And it was a mixture of students and entrepreneurs and leaders. I thought, right, that's it. I've got my first 10. Don't do anything else. Interview 10. And then after that, it unravels and people see the content and they want to be on the podcast. And now, obviously, I don't particularly have to do any outreach, in a very lucky position that I just handpick who I want, definitely starting small. Maybe anybody out there who wants to start a podcast, writing down what you'd like it to be about. So is there a theme or a topic? And then from that, you could say, well, what would I like to call it? And then from there, you could maybe get some feedback from people and see if it's a good idea, if you want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Test it out. More play, more experimentation.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure to have you on. There is one more question I want to ask you. Talk to me about music and your experience being a musician. I did not know this.
So I've been a musician, most of my life. I think I was, I don't know, maybe 8 or so when I started playing violin, and I studied at a place called Royal Conservatory of Music here in Toronto. It was very, firm and regimented. And I think maybe I lasted a couple years, and I had this very stern Romanian teacher. Whenever I made a mistake, he would wrap my knuckles with his baton. And after a couple of years of being subject to corporal punishment in the pursuit of playing music, I decided in my young brain, I don't think music should be painful. I think it should be fun. And so I asked my parents if I could get an electric guitar instead. And they bought me an electric guitar. I just sort of self-taught myself a few songs. I was like, oh, this is way more fun. This is way cooler. And so I started pursuing that. Just kind of did that on my own, never really played with others. And then I told you the story about moving out west and had in the back of my mind, I wanted to be in a band. And I was a pretty good guitarist, but I hadn't really played with other people. One night there was an open mic night at a local bar, and they were inviting musicians on stage. I went up on stage. It was terrifying. Never done that, let alone in front of a bunch of other people. But the house band who was doing that, they loved it. I think it was the next day, the bassist asked me if I wanted to be in a band with them. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And so we formed this band. We played for the next couple of years, mainly shows, around town, some neighboring towns. Then I decided, oh, I really loved it. At this point, I was mid-20s. And I decided, oh, I really love this. I love this feeling of playing music, of making people move, all this kind of stuff. But I want to connect with some really good musicians and go on tour, release CDs. Decided the best way to do that would be to go to music school and meet people there. So I went to music school in Nelson, British Columbia, met some amazing musicians there. We put together a band, six of us, because one of the bars in town needed a band for St. Patrick's Day. They put up a poster or something, and we answered that. And we had 2 weeks to prepare. We created a 2.5 hour set in 2 weeks, just rehearsing like crazy, playing a bunch of traditional Irish songs, folk songs. St. Patrick's Day came around and it was packed. Line up outside the door, really good reception. We got more and more gigs as a result of that. Eventually, after about 6 months, we developed our own sound. We recorded a couple of CDs. We toured all over North America. We toured Europe a couple of times. And it was a blast until it wasn't. And after about 2.5 years, the music industry it's tough. It's a grind and you don't make much money, probably less money, even less money now, but it's a hard lifestyle. And I think,
Yeah.
maybe once you break through to a certain level and you're playing at nice theaters or concert venues and you got nice meals and you're sleeping in a nice hotel. But we were in 100-person clubs, eating whatever bar food they want to give us. We're sleeping in our bus or friends' couches. 2 tours in Europe were amazing. We were, pampered and treated like royalty in comparison. After 2.5 years, I don't think I can sustain this much longer. But that itch is still there to play music with other people, play for other people.
Interesting. I actually know a few people in the record label business. Maybe I will pass your details along. We'll talk about that after this.
I'll tell you when I get my new band together.
Yes. I think with musicians now, it's the same with artists and the creative industry. It's a lot about brand partnerships. I think that's more sustainable alongside your gigs, for example. And sponsorships are huge now, especially for festivals and events. It is going back to the business side and logistics. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. What's interesting me to these days, interesting and concerning, is AI music. I don't know if you've ever played around with Suno, but it's
But I've
incredible.
heard about the controversy. Yeah.
Well, it can create some truly incredible music just with a bit of prompting. I've used it to create music for my events, very customized to the types of things I'm doing, whether it's a guided meditation or a breath work or dance party. It's amazing what it can create. I don't know what sort of effect that will have on the music industry, but there's tons of AI artists on Spotify. You will not be able to tell that they are AI. You will think that they are real musicians because it sounds so good. And what's unfortunate about that is that these models have been trained on real life music from artists who put their blood and sweat and tears and soul into this music. And these AI models are trained on that. And then these AI companies just make money off of, and they're not really compensating the artists.
I think in terms of copyright and IP, that's what comes into play, having policies surrounding disclosing that you've used AI. It's a requirement in some industries. I think in terms of copyright laws, there's a lot going on in the creative industry, especially as you say with musicians. I think it just feels like it's a loss of hard work, as you say, blood, sweat and tears, a lot of time and dedication. I'm not saying we shouldn't use AI. I'm a big advocate for it, and I do think we should embrace it for what it is. Use it to automate tasking as much as we think we need to, and then it alleviates the pressure and we can focus on our teams, people, connection, community, the things that matter, I feel. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah. Well, I use it extensively as well. And if you extrapolate where this is all heading, it's hard not to see a future in which AI is not replacing the vast majority, if not all, jobs eventually. And I just listened to Tristan Harris on the Modern Wisdom podcast, going deep on this topic. And it's funny how the people that are the most concerned about where AI is heading are the people at the top of the industry who are building these things, and they're sounding the alarms at the same time as they're building these things. But they are deeply in the know, and they're actually asking to be regulated because they know where this is heading, right? And the problem with the way this is all unfolding is that it requires massive amounts of collaboration and cooperation across international borders. The United States as a country can't say we're going to put a pause on AI model development because we're worried about how powerful these machines are getting, and we need to pause and make sure that we have safety standards because they feel that China, if China doesn't have those same guardrails, they'll take the lead, and it's kind of a winner takes all race. And no individual company in the AI space wants to do that because then they'll get their lunch eaten by all their competitors. And so it really requires an environment of very high level collaboration, which I don't think that the climate is there. Everybody's racing forward at breakneck speed, and they can't afford to put the guardrails in place because the competitor who doesn't is going to beat them to it. And so I think it requires collectively people putting pressure on governments, on transnational bodies. We need to really consider this because this is not to be doom and gloom about it, but it's an existential threat. This is going to be it's already wiping out jobs by the thousands and the millions. But as it gets more and more powerful, the very nature of capitalism, a company seeks to maximize return. When they see that there are AI models or robots that can do things much more cheaply and more efficiently than a human, they're not going to keep humans around out of the goodness of their own hearts, because if it doesn't positively impact their profit and loss and their balance sheet statements, they're going to get rid of those people. And that will only accelerate over the years to come. So we need to think about this collectively.
Absolutely. It's definitely a collaborative conversation to have. I think there are some companies who let people go and now they're hiring again because they realize that they do need human beings. And then secondly, I spoke to somebody who is based in Silicon Valley. They're the hotbed for AI, but also robotics isn't being spoken about enough, I don't think. And I'm keeping my ears to the ground in terms of robots in homes, helping do certain types of tasking that maybe you don't want to do. That is also the future. And that's coming around very quickly. I know that there's beta testing by the end of this year. There'll be a lot more movement in autonomous vehicles as well. We're seeing it in London, in the US. I'm not sure whether Canada, you're trialing any type of...
Not that I know of. No, I haven't seen them, but I've seen them plenty in the US. And, like I hear so many people say, oh, well, AI is not going to take my job or whatever. They're a plumber or something like that. Just follow Boston Dynamics and what they're building. It's not going to be very long at all before robots can do complicated tasks such as plumbing or electrical or drywalling or, whatever, all these things that we think are beyond the purview of robots. It's all...
I think, where do we go? And I've always said having one job forever might not be reality. It probably won't be reality. It will be that you pivot across multiple different avenues, portfolio careers, and you dive deep into multiple passions that you have. And that will possibly be a new way of working. And then they're also saying a 3-day work week might be our new reality in years to come. And I think, but then you need to be able to sustain that in terms of the cost of living.
It's funny because, you go back a few years when AI was first starting to come on the scene in a meaningful way. And obviously people have been working on this for decades, but like when it started becoming a consumer facing thing, there was this promise of AI was going to take away all the drudgery and it's going to allow us to just spend our days creating art and beauty and whatever. It's taken away the art and it's left us with the drudgery, now taking over a lot of the creation of art and all these things that we think are human domain. I don't think anybody knows where that future is heading, but I do think it's important that people actually wake up and start to ask the questions and start asking the people that should be asking the questions to start asking the questions. Because if we're just plowing ahead with, it sort of feels like we'll see what happens sort of attitude. For now, I am taking full advantage of these tools. I also think I've got 3 kids. I want to put pressure on people that have the ability to influence how this is shaping to actually, be asking these questions.
Absolutely. And I think, in terms of your children and the younger generation, obviously they're growing up with tech from day one in comparison to us.
Yeah. I'm trying to get them literate with this stuff because I know they'll need it. But at the same time, I also have this other pull, which is I want to go just get a piece of land out in the country and live there with my kids and grow lettuce and return to something very simple and human. I don't know how I'll resolve that.
It's not just you. I think the trends this year, Gen Z wanting to step away from social media, put the phone down, get back together in person. We're all craving some type of connection. It's universally happening right now. It's not just you and me, it's society. We need normalcy in a way of human. But it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Mike. Any last words for the listeners?
Well, first off, I'll tell people if they want to check out what I'm up to, just go to way-finders.com. Take seriously this idea of having a soul. And soul is what is true, deep essence at my core that's beneath all of the exterior identities that I've created throughout this life that others have created for me. And to take seriously that process of discovering one's soul, of entering into a dialogue with one's soul, of listening to, that process will undoubtedly take you somewhere, maybe difficult, but eventually take you somewhere beautiful. If you want to live a full, human, meaningful life and not look back many years from now or on your deathbed full of regrets, you have to engage in that dialogue.
Thank you very much. And that was Mike from Wayfinders. If you want to go and either drop him a message or find out a little bit more, I will put all of the links in the show notes. You can find Mike online, and I'll speak to you all very, very soon. Bye.